So thanks for attending. My name is Scott, and I'm one of the supervisors for Tutoring Services. I primarily work with the tutors that work with the technical programs. Those are the programs that are, a lot of them are at the Micron campus up in Napa, but we have some at the Ada County campus, our IT programs, welding, auto body, power sports, mechatronics, drafting, horticulture, the practical nursing program, and then out at our Canyon County campus on, I believe it's Caldwell Boulevard or Karcher Road. Um, we have our physical therapy program out there and law enforcement. So, but I also work with general ed students, and I've been doing our study skills workshops. I've been with the school since it started back in 2009. And prior to that, I was with the technical programs that are now part of CWI that came from Boise State University through the Selland College. So I've been around with the campus and got a lot of input from faculty, students on these workshops. And one of the things I'm going to provide to you, especially if any of you are getting additional credit for workshop attendance, I will provide a form that you can fill out the information on the instructors that are going to give you the credit. You can provide their names to me. If you're not getting additional credit, since it is an option, I appreciate you taking the time on your Friday to join the workshop. And we kind of make it, it's a small group today. This is the third workshop I've done. Actually, this is the first time I've done these workshops on Zoom. So I was a little bit nervous, but please feel free to, there's a little critique at the end you can fill out and give me some recommendations and critique and comments on how I can improve the session or make it a little more interactive. If you have a pencil and paper handy, I do have one little fun exercise to give you. You don't have to take part in it, but if you have a pencil and paper handy, you're more than welcome to join in. It's just a short one. Feel free, obviously, to take a break. It is a 90-minute workshop with a small group. We might try to get done a little earlier. But if you need to take a break, feel free to. Obviously, that's one of the advantages of working online. And I will provide you the PowerPoint presentation that I'm using so you have it for reference. I'll put it into the chat in the form of a PDF so you have that. So I know some instructors additional credit. I don't know if any of you, if you are getting additional credit, have to write a little paper. There is no exam for this. Some instructors ask if I give a quiz, and I do not for extra credit because that takes away from the focus on the workshop if you have to worry about that. So I will send out the notification. So just to get a little bit of an idea with the group here, how many of you are taking courses on any of the campuses? Are you actually going to a physical campus? And again, you can use the little reaction. You can use the little a hand if you want, or you can respond verbally, or you can respond it in the chat. Feel free to use the chat. So are any of you taking any on-campus courses? Okay, thank you. Good. Are any of you taking any remote classes where you're, I guess you could call it like a high flex class or a remote class where the teacher, it's like you're in the classroom, but you're online using Zoom or Discord or Blackboard Collaborate. So are any of you taking a class that meets at a specific time? Thank you. And then are you taking, okay, so we have a couple of you, good. Oh, three of you, good. So are any of you taking online classes that are what we call asynchronous, where you just have to, you don't meet physically on like a Zoom or anything like that. You just take the course online and you just read material and use the discussion board. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so that gives us an idea. And okay, you don't have, good, don't have any class. And that's understandable. As you can imagine, when, and I don't know if any of you were here, if this is your first or second semester, that's great. You got in at the time when at least the instructors got this down a little more to a science. But last year in the spring, when the pandemic hit, um, and we didn't go back to classes after that spring break, Easter break. It was kind of a little bit of a turmoil because a lot of the classes that met in session, everybody had to kind of go online, and it was kind of a culture shock, not just for the many students that aren't used to taking online classes, but also faculty that suddenly had to teach. And unfortunately, some of the classes, it was a little bit of a challenge because we have some classes like in this on the technical programs like automotive and diesel. You're working on like a diesel engine, or you're working on tractors, or you're working on equipment or power sports. And so it really took away that option. So it was a bit frustrating for many students that it happened right around the spring break of last year. So when and if this pandemic ends, and I'm hoping that, and I don't know what the school's going to do, but if things turn around a little bit, we might go back to some more on-campus classes in the fall. I'm not sure, but definitely we'll be continuing in these high flex and remote classes, I'm sure too. Um, and that presents an advantage and disadvantage. Obviously, what are some of you that are taking, say, online classes, and you can put this into the chat, or you can mention, what are some of the challenges that you face as far as study skills? Anyone have anything to share on that and when you're in an online environment? Being a more visual learner. That's good. Thank you, Gary. Yes, definitely. And obviously, for those of you that aren't used to taking an online class, now it's a little different if you're in an online class that it's synchronous, where you're actually the teacher or the professor is talking and you're listening. You're just not in the classroom. And I know some classes are given a choice of attending a campus or online. But the asynchronous classes, online classes, if you haven't taken those, can be a challenge with such things as time management, because the class is not um, the class is not uh, adjust the camera there. The class is not it's not self-paced. Obviously, you have to do it. How many of you have discussion boards that you have to routinely, like every week, make a post and maybe respond to a couple of students? Any of you? Yeah, and that can be yeah. So and you probably know that you'd have to turn your assignments in an asynchronous class just like you would in class. And so time management, especially in with English, good. And so yeah, it can be quite a challenge in an online environment to be able to study skills. As a matter of fact, I don't know that I don't think CWI does this, but there are some community colleges in the country. If you're a freshman, a first semester student, you actually have to take an assessment and pass it with a certain score. It asks you various questions about working in an online environment, and they want their freshman students to be able to have some uh, sense of control and things in an online class. And so I don't think our school does that. I think you can sign up for an online class, but in an online environment, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't ask that. And I see from Carrie there, some of you probably have multiple online classes. I didn't think of asking. So how many of you are taking more than one asynchronous class? A class where you just have to read the assignments and things like that? Anybody taking more than one? TOEIC in two classes. Thank you. So that can be a challenge because some many students, especially freshmen, will ask the tutors or ask me, how much time do you typically study? Now it's not set in stone, but obviously, if you are taking an in-class class, or you can expect about 2 hours of outside study for every credit. So if you're taking a 3 credit class, that's about 6 hours study. And again, this is not set in stone, but in an online environment, especially with an asynchronous class, where you don't meet with the professor, it's on your responsibility to do the work. that goes up to 3 times 3. If it's a 3 credit class, 9 to 10 hours a week. And again, depending on the class. Oh, and okay, wow, 4 classes. Okay, good. So yes, so you can expect up to 9 hours. And of course, one of the big challenges with time management is, what if I'm working 40 hours a week, or now that I'm home, I have family or even pets. One of the biggest challenges, um, even our supervisors in tutoring have, is interruption by pets, even more so than children. And so, like right now, I have a 14-year-old cat, and he absolutely goes thermal when I'm on the computer. So I have to lock him in another room with his uh, cat litter box and water and things while I'm doing this. So obviously, I can't do that necessarily with a young child, but yeah. So okay, and one of you, okay, all my classes say, okay, doing 5 classes, yeah. So yeah, it can be a challenge with time management. So if any of you have suggestions to the rest of the group on some strategies that you might use, feel free to share them. Either you can use your microphone, or you can put them into the chat for everybody to see on there. We'll kind of do the workshop. We'll kind of do the workshop in little blocks. We'll go through and talk about a concept or two, and then we'll kind of take a stop and kind of reflect on some of the slides um, and discussion. So we'll kind of not go through the whole thing and then try to have you remember everything, because it kind of works good. And again, because this is the first time we've done these workshops on Zoom, and we did advertise this out. You probably saw the advertisement either through your instructors. Some of you, or hopefully most of you, got some kind of an email through the student newsletter about the workshops. I honestly did not know um, how many students could show up. I mean, we could have had 300. When I do have these workshops on campus, usually I average about 10 to 15 students, although sometimes I'll get more than that at the beginning, because many instructors do offer additional credit. So good. So, Carrie, I treat it like a job with specific hours and work 1.5 hours with 30 minutes. Very good. Thank you for that comment. That's a really good thing. I use my break at work. Good. Yeah, I appreciate that, definitely. And uh, Carrie brings up a good comment about that. In study skills, we used to think that an effective study skills, if you work a long period of time, would be to work about 50 minutes or so and take a 10-minute break. And again, this is not set in stone, but now some educational experts that supposedly know this feel that a more intense study of, say, 25 minutes, where you totally get focused and then take a short 5-minute break. I don't know if any of you use a specific routine, but I used to encourage students, if they have to study for a large block of time, to go maybe 45 to 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break. But now some experts feel it should be maybe 25 minutes with a quick 5-minute break. So if any of you have any ideas or suggestions for that, that would be good. Okay, that's a good point for Carrie. I get distracted if it's a shorter session. Yes. And obviously, what are some of the biggest challenges with study skills in an online environment? Well, even in a face-to-face environment, do any of you encounter, I mentioned about the interruptions with family or pets and things, um, street cleaner, uh, anything, but do any of you have any other things that might distract you when you're trying to study in an online environment? The phone, yes. As a matter of fact, because of social media, it's not uncommon that you might study, and some students have told me this. I even sometimes do it. You know, you might, like, if you taking math and you have My Math Lab up, or you're working on Blackboard responding to a discussion board, down in the taskbar of your computer, you might have Facebook up, or your social media accounts going, or you have your phone, you don't have it set on the vibrate or quiet mode. And so there's a good one there. I have to leave home to study. Yeah. Definitely. That's a big one too. As a matter of fact, some students tell me that was a struggle last year, is that they just could not study at home because of the environment, but the campuses were closed. And now we do have the tutor labs and computer labs. I think at each of the campuses, there are some open areas now. They do, obviously, you have to do the social distancing protocol with mask and thing, but some students are actually going to campuses for a few hours because it's actually really quiet in certain areas like our tutor labs. We don't have tutors in our tutor labs at our campuses like Ada, uh, Micron. The tutor lab is not open at the Napa main campus, but the computer lab is. And then we have a tutor computer lab at the Canyon County Center. Um, and Aspen Creek, if any of you are taking classes. Um, Yeah. Um, some students are going to campus, even if it's for a few hours, just to take like an online test, whether they bring their own computer since you have wireless. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Yeah, it's a little difficult challenge for motivation in an online class because you're not reminded of your assignments like you are in person. And that's where some study skills strategies using time management might come in. And definitely that's worth showing an example on. So yes, that's a big one. That's a big one because in online classes, that's one of the biggest challenges, especially in the first week of an online class, because well, I think the instructors have an option in an online class that's asynchronous where you don't meet with the professor. They'll give you certain assignments to do the very first week. Like, for example, you might have to introduce yourself on Blackboard. You might have to read the syllabus and take a syllabus quiz. You might have to do a short, like, what are your favorite things you like to do in life? And if you don't do those assignments, and they're usually very simplistic, the first week you can get administratively dropped from the class. And so, um, especially one of the biggest challenges in online classes that students come in is they forget to do their Blackboard. I had one student that was struggling. She kept getting a low score in her Blackboard post, and she didn't realize when she read the syllabus, she was making her weekly post. But does anyone know what she forgot to do? She was making her post, but what was she forgetting to do? Those of you that experience Blackboard, anyone have an idea? Thank you. Very good, Carrie. Yes, forgetting to respond to one or two other people. And so she couldn't understand because the professor combined the grade for all of it. And she was only getting like 50%. And I said, well, let's look at your syllabus. And sure enough, it says, oh, you have to also respond to two other posts in addition to the post that you make. So, or responding incorrectly, definitely, because I know some instructors have a rubric on how you are supposed to respond on the discussion board. You can't just simply say, I agree with what Scotty said. You have to put some critical thinking and comments into your post, and you're graded for it. So that can be one of the challenges. So I think I'll bring up my little slide that we can kind of share and go through some comments. And again, one of the things I want you to take away from this here is this is the third study skills workshop. I had one yesterday and one on Wednesday. And one of the things that I mentioned to the students is if you have a system now that works already, by all means use it. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. But if you have if any of this material we provide or the discussion from the other people here on the workshop will be helpful, please, take it in mind. But I have some students that are perfectly happy. They told me they're really content with the system that they've set up, and by all means use it. You don't want to change something that's already working. But I saw the one comment there about the challenge of having to remember when you do assignments in an online class, which is a biggie. And that's where a calendar, either a written calendar, if you're a more traditional student that likes to write it down, or how many of you use your electronic calendar? You have a very robust calendar on your Office 365. Do any of you use that? And I can show that to you if you didn't. Another thing, how many of you have a smartphone? Oh, you use both. Thank you. Definitely. That's a good option too. Do any of you also that might have a smartphone, do you download your Blackboard app so when like professors make announcements, they pop up on your page? Do any of you do that, use that option? Thank you. Yeah, that's always a good thing. But I have some students that have a smartphone that don't want to download the Blackboard app. They just go in and check their Blackboard every day. They just check it every morning, every evening. By now, you probably know when the professors make certain announcements. Some like to do it all the time. You probably notice some instructors will make comments like every Friday or Sunday or something, for the upcoming week. Um, and so some students tell me, even though they have a smartphone, they just simply don't want to get the constant beeping or whatever of Blackboard, and they would just prefer to log in. So again, I'll be making this presentation. I'll go ahead and share my screen here, and you can let me know if does everyone see the presentation okay? And I'll close it from time to time, but oh yeah, good. Let me bring the chat open. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so let's go through and again, feel free to make some comments, any comments that you would like to do. And if any of you make a comment on the discussion board and I don't answer, feel free to respond back to other students on that. That will be uh, very helpful. One of my tutors absolutely loves to make quotes on my PowerPoint, and she changes the quotes every time. And so I hadn't. This is the first time I've been able to upgrade and use this PowerPoint. And by the way, these PowerPoints are put together by myself, but my tutors and even instructors like to make some comments on here. So they change quite frequently. But I absolutely love that comment from Dr. King there. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Do any of you have classes where the teacher emphasizes critical thinking strategies? Thank you. Yes. And it's a surprise. I have been to conferences around the country with tutoring, and I had the pleasure of joining a tutoring conference about 3 years ago in Boston. Those of you that might be familiar with the Boston area, it's a target-rich education environment. I mean, you have some of the top institutions in the country within like 300 miles there. You have Harvard, MIT, Boston College, Boston University, a whole slew of private schools, University of Pennsylvania, Penn State. I mean, but it's surprising when I talk to um, tutoring supervisors at those schools that even in these 4-year prestigious schools, there is a challenge for critical thinking skills, just being able to take a look at a question or a question that's given to you and to think of it in terms of the professor provides you information, and of course if you write it in your notes and you kind of write it pretty much the same, well that's repeating it, but the next level is paraphrasing it. Some of you that are taking English may be told that you need to learn to paraphrase so you're not plagiarizing something. But the highest level is called reflection. That's where you take a concept or something and you just kind of reflect it in your own words. And next week, I have a note taking and listening workshop, which talks about using reflection in your notes, putting them in your own words. I mean, obviously, what you have to write, what the professors say, it's very important, but kind of making a little comment or using reflection is a big one. So that's my favorite comment from Dr. King, who, by the way, I had when I was going to high school many years ago, he came and spoke to a bunch of high schools in Los Angeles, and I was just absolutely floored by how eloquent and just the information and the energy that he provided in the audience, talking on everything from civil rights to education, and truly a remarkable man. But even down here, you see Dr. Albert Einstein there. A person who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new. And Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the incandescent light bulb, would probably say the same thing. He tried and failed so many times. And that quote there, learning is not attained by chance. It must be sought for with ardor and diligence. Does anybody know who Abigail Adams was? Anyone have an idea? That's a pretty nice quote from her. She was the wife of the second president of the U.S., John Adams, and it's interesting that she would make a quote like that, but she did, and so definitely. Now, one of the things I kind of want to talk about, and this is a little bit of I don't want to say it's controversial, but it is something that's being looked at. Are any of you familiar with the Vark learning styles? Does anyone know what I mean by Vark? Some of you may, I don't know if any of you are in like a QUID or CWI class. Thank you. Yeah. Um, the Vark is an inventory that you can take. However, I would say by now, many of you um, probably know what kind of learning styles you like to do. Um, anyone? Uh, are you a visual learner? Are you an oral learner? Are you a read-write learner or a kinesthetic learner? And this is kind of important for tutors because this helps tutors to understand the kind of learning styles when we work with students on that. Um, it's kind of an important thing. The reason that I mention this is controversial is that some educators like to use this in lower grades, say around the early school years, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, just to kind of see how students learn. And some educators believe you shouldn't pigeonhole students and tell them you're going to be a visual learner or um, you're going to be a read write learner. You have the only way you're going to learn is if you read something. And kinesthetic, does anyone know what kinesthetic is? That's the engagement of your like hands and body to what you're working with. And so, however, now you probably have a style that you really like to do. For example, I know I see a lot of students bring in little colored pencils, the ones that are in that little tray, and they absolutely color code everything. They like to underline different things in their notes in different colors. And so that's a good sign that you are a visual learner. But certainly I have students that write their notes out, and what's the first thing they do? They go home and retype them. So that is a sign of a read write and a kinesthetic learner. I have some students that feel the need they like to record the lecture and play it back. I don't know if any of you do that option. Most of the instructors I know, if you do that option, even at four-year school like BSU, I used to record a lecture because it was simply impossible. Some of the classes I took at BSU had 400 students in it. And it's really hard to hear the professor, especially if you're up in the back of the room. So they usually allow you to record it. You just can't walk up and monkey around with the recorder. You have to leave it on the table right next to where she is lecturing, say, and you can't touch it. And so, but it's nice to have. And so, a big example of that too on the kind of learning styles and how that plays in. I took a history class at BSU years ago, U.S. history class, and it was done in a large lecture hall where the professor came in, he gave his lecture, you took notes down, then you left, and then what kind of test did you get? A multiple choice test. So you're kind of studying to memorize, right? How many of you have experienced that? Um, and I won't get into the debate on what kinds of especially for the U.S., how education is going, if that's a good class. Some of you may be familiar with what's called a blended classroom, where the professor doesn't have necessarily a traditional lecture, and we have blended classes here at CWI. Now, my wife took the same class. Well, she took U.S. history, but with a different professor. Now, what he did is the class only met like 4 or 5 times a semester. And what she had to do is on the BSU public television station, she had to view a 26, I think it was 26 parts called The Unfinished Nation. And what that was is they had pictures and professors and experts talking about US history. And then what you had to do, there were 2 1-hour sessions that she had to view. Then all she did is she had to write in her own words using reflection what, basically what was being presented in the lecture. And there was no test. Basically, that was your assignment. You had to do like a 1 or 2 page, maybe it's a 2 page paper reflecting on each of those. And then maybe you had to do a paper during the semester. Now, does anyone have an idea if you think if I were to present those two options, which one would you like better? Would you like the more traditional lecture or the opportunity to view and write it in your own words? Anyone have a choice on that? If you were given the opportunity. Yeah, view and write. And okay, and you want to have the traditional. Some people like the traditional. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. Some of the advantages, of course, there is with the video portion class, she was able to record it. For one thing, these lectures came on in the morning every Saturday morning. One started from 4 to 5 and 5 to 6, and so you either have to get up. But the other thing she did is you're able to record them. So what's the advantage of recording a lecture? Anyone? And Carrie brings up it would depend on the subject too, which option would be better. Obviously, one of the big advantage of that option to view it is you can stop the video, you can back it up, and so you can write notes down, where you obviously can't do that in a lecture, because once the professor says something, then if you haven't written it down, it's gone. And so that is one advantage. But certainly many students prefer the traditional method because they're able to take notes and learn it that way, rather than having to maybe write something in reflection. Reflection does take practice. It does take a little practice. The more that you do it, obviously, like anything, like math, the more kind of problems you do, the better you get at doing a math problem. I added this slide here, Dale's cone of experience. You notice there, unless you have an eidetic or a photographic memory like Dr. Spencer Reed on Criminal Minds, those of you that maybe watched that show, he has a tendency to read or see something and remember it. That's not the norm, though. Reading, our brains definitely, and if you come to my memory workshop, you'll learn a little more about that, but our brains are not wired for reading unless you're like that. Now, my younger sister was like that. She could read a book and basically remember it. It used to get me so irritated because I have to read something, I have to chunk it, I have to go back and read it again. I have to look at the front and the back of the book, or the front and back of each chapter, and see the synopsis. And if there's terms, I have to take notes. But some people do have that ability to kind of remember. But reading by itself is not the most efficient way. And a Professor Abenhaus in Germany spent a considerable amount of his life studying memory retention. And obviously you see that 10%, what they're referring to there is if you read something and don't reinforce the reading or go back and review it within about a week to 10 days, you're going to lose, you'll only retain about 10% of what you read. You lose about 80 to 90% of it. How many of you read out loud? At times, do you read out loud? Reading out loud. Why would reading out loud be helpful in certain cases? You're using, yeah, okay. It can be a little challenge because you hear your voice. One of the advantages of reading out loud, though, is you're using more than one sense now. You're using your eyes, and then you're using your ears, and you're using your voice. And so reading out loud can help you to hear the words. It's just like if a professor was talking. And I use this technique if I come across a very important concept. I kind of, even if I read it under my breath, and I do this when I take tests. You obviously, if you're in a classroom, you can't read out loud. If you're taking tests online, though, or in a classroom, if you just, move your voice and kind of move your lips, sometimes that helps me to visualize the question better. Um, However, you can see what happens when you start viewing something. How many of you have classes where you get to view things like YouTube or videos that the professor puts out? Um, Watching a demonstration usually is a very effective way. You'll notice that because unless you're sight impaired, obviously we take in about 80 to 85% of what we learn visually. And so um, in this particular case, watching a demonstration, that's why my wife liked that history class, because they would show pictures of what it was like back in the early days of our country, or a world history class, same thing, or anything, watching a demonstration. Obviously, if you go farther down where you do the right thing, how many of you are going to be in classes where you have to present a topic to the class, either individually or in a group? Okay. This is one of the reasons why tutors are so effective, because tutors are not teachers. Tutors reinforce concepts, but they are not the teachers. The teachers are the ones that provide new material and concepts to you. The tutors are there mainly to reinforce, to help you to get a little better grasp understanding of it. But that's one of the reasons that tutors are so adept at remembering things, because they are, they are repeating it over and over again. And so in a sense, they are, I don't want to say they're teaching it, but that's why they fall down into that green area at the bottom. And so if you give a presentation, you obviously are going to remember a topic much more than if you're just reading about it and taking a multiple choice test. So that's one of the things on there. So that's why when I asked you if you read out loud, you're starting to use um, more of your senses. And so it helps you to remember it using multi-strategy. Does anybody know what LTM is? It creates a longer sensory path to LTM. Anyone know what LTM is? Thank you. Long-term memory. The reason for that, again, is if you join me in a couple weeks for my memory workshop, I think it's about 3 weeks or so from here. When you take in new information, you only have about 5 to 8 seconds to take it in. Then it goes into what we call your short-term memory. And your short-term memory is not infinite. That's why trying to cram or study like 5 chapters the day before a test, you need to allow your brain a chance to absorb it, your synapses of your brain to work. Short-term memory can be overloaded and is not infinite, meaning that you don't remember it, but putting it into long-term memory is the key. You only have about 30 seconds for short-term memory on something or a bit of information to get it into long-term memory. And so that's a big thing by being able to use more senses. And it also helps in access and recall. When do we need access and recall? Well, for one reason, if you're giving a presentation, but primarily if you're as far as a classroom environment, if you're taking a test, you obviously want to have recall. And so that can help too. And it does help with motivation. So when you learn different ways, some of you mentioned about the struggles with motivation. Motivation is not easy. It isn't something really that a tutor can help. We can suggest, but motivation comes from who? Where does the motivation come from? It comes from yourself. And so, we can make suggestions, just like this PowerPoint here. I'm going to talk a little bit about motivation, but it basically comes from within yourself. And so this is just a kind of suggestion. Actually, a couple of tutors put this together from their studies there. Visualizing it is a big thing. It creates mental images. I try to tell tutors to think of a mental image of it. For example, now this is a very simplistic one, but for students that are in a very basic math class that are maybe trying to figure out the area of a perimeter, or the length around a perimeter, or the area of something, I try to visualize. Well, pretend you're putting a fence up around a field, or you're looking at it like a farming field or something like that, and try to visualize it. And so one of the big things is to visualize and then verbalizing it again. And it does tend to work, although if you do struggle with hearing your own voice, um, but verbalizing is another option to look at. Explaining it out loud, you'll see this is where I keep coming back to that reflection, not explaining it exactly word for word how the professor provides it to you, how she might provide it to you, but in your own words, reflection. And this does take practice. This does take practice. And there isn't any one time frame as to how long. It just depends on the course you're taking and if you get the opportunity to reflect information. This usually occurs in classes like social science classes. It can be in any class, especially if any of you have taken a class like philosophy or logic, a class where maybe there is no right or wrong answer. You're not looking for a specific answer, like say a math problem or maybe a science problem. You're looking at how well you defend your response. Like if I were to ask you um, something about communism or socialism or capitalism, and if I asked you to compare and contrast, you're not looking for a right or wrong answer. What the professor is looking for is how you defend, how you compare, say, communism and capitalism. How would you compare the similarities of it or contrast it? And so it's going to be how well you defend your argument. Kinesthetic uses muscle theory. Can you be kinesthetic in a class where you simply just take notes, like say a psychology class? Anyone have an idea how you can be more kinesthetic? Kinesthetic, again, is where you're interacting with your body, like your hands and your feet, your brain. Um, Anyone have an idea how you can be kinesthetic in almost any class? One way is flashcards. So flashcards, I don't know if any of you use flashcards, even though flashcards, like I used to joke at flashcards like, oh my God, you're kidding me. Flashcards? Well, if you have a class where maybe you have a lot of terms, like a psych class or a business class, or then you start getting into a science class like A&P, flashcards can be a real kinesthetic way because you're writing them on a card and then you're grabbing them in your hand and you're reviewing them. And that's one basic way of being kinesthetic. But obviously, if you're in a technical program, like when I work with the students in, say, the power sports, they're constantly tearing apart a lawnmower or a snowmobile or a jet ski. So you're kind of kinesthetic. But in those classes, where do you think the students struggle? Anyone have an idea where the students struggle in a class where you're always out working with snowmobiles or something like that, as far as studying? It's not the lab part. Where do they struggle with? Yes, time to reflect. In other words, where they struggle and get frustrated, some of them, is in the lecture part, because if you go and you enroll in a program where you're going to work on, like you're going to start a business repairing jet skis and snowmobiles, when you're taking the course, not all of it is out in the lab doing kinesthetic. You also have to look at theory, like notes. You have to go to lectures. You have to read things. The automotive students, for example, have to go onto some websites and learn about transmissions by looking on a computer screen, much like you would with math. Then they have to take multiple choice tests. So many of them struggle with the theory and the book part, as I call it, as opposed to working out in the lab. And that's where I come in to try to help with note-taking strategies and how can we make the theory part of your course more interesting. Now, this here was added by an instructor. I think he's still teaching at CWI, but he absolutely professes by this see, say, do strategy. And notice that the example here is for math, but you can use this in a lot of cases. You have a difficult math problem. Well, the first thing you do is read the math problem and examine the significant details, which obviously you have to do in a story problem, right? Or a problem where you have to read it and figure out, do you have enough information to solve the problem? Then you have to figure out what is the specific information I take out of the problem. Then you verbalize the steps. You actually read it out loud, or you just read it and you go through it. And this is one of the things I work with business students when they're taking business math, because I also tutor business math. I also tell them to take notes. Just don't simply look on a textbook on the computer. If you have an online textbook and you have my math lab open, write down the notes to a particular step. Like if you're figuring interest rates or APR rates, or if you have to calculate stocks or something like that, or do a balance sheet. Write the notes down. You have to write notes down. You just simply can't look at the screen and do the problem on my math lab. If you're a visual learner, you color code steps. So like if I'm doing a math problem and I see a super important step, like a basic one is where obviously those of you that have taken a basic algebra class know that one of the problems when you're doing a problem, you might forget to bring down a negative number, or if you have two negatives, it's a positive number you bring down, and little steps like that. So a good way to help you with something like that is to color code it. And again, it can be for any course problem, not just math. Recite the problem again, and then we rework the problem. How many of you use my math lab or have taken a class with my math lab? Any of you? What is the button on my math lab that helps you reinforce a math problem? Anybody? So if yep, interactive. One of the buttons is if I'm helping a student with a business math problem, but it could be a calc problem if it's one of our calculus tutors, or a college algebra. If they're using my math lab and you spend several minutes helping a student, or math 123, if any of you have to take taken math 123, or math 95 for that matter, using my math lab. You work among math problem and then you jump to the next problem. But before you do that, you might want to hit that little button that says do a similar problem, right? And you do it several times, because in math, one way to get it to understand it is repetition, or what we call the rote method. Do it over and over again. Do it later in the week. Do it next week. So that's why if I help a student with a math problem, say I help a student with a math problem from chapter 2-4, then the student comes in at the end of the week and says, Scotty, can you help me with this problem in chapter 2-8? What do you think the first thing I'm going to do before I help the student with 2-8? Anyone? What I'm going to do is say, okay, before we do the problem with 2-8, did you understand the concept from 2-4? So I'm going to say, let's put up a 2-4 problem and see if you can remember it. If you can, great. If you can't, then I would, as a tutor, I would be a little concerned about why we spent several minutes helping you on 2-4, but now you can't do a problem on 2-4. So did you use the repetition to try to work on the problem and come back to it? So those are just the little things that kind of come up in that. Now, here's another thing. Now, this gets a little way. So does anybody, from those first slides, does anybody have any comments they'd like to share on some of those things or strategies they do? Or again, feel free if you need to take a short break, you can. We'll just stop for like a second here. If anybody has any questions on those first slides that I put up on, or any comments that you might have that help you with your sensory and using different senses and things like that for your coursework. Obviously, reading is a big thing, isn't it? And how many of you struggle with reading textbooks online? Or how many of you like reading textbooks online? Or how many of you like reading textbooks, the more traditional textbook method, as opposed to reading the textbook online? Very good. I have to have a book in my hand. Well, I agree. I'm with you. I do not like reading a textbook online. Even if I have two computer screens, I do not like reading a textbook online. I struggle with it. Good. Thank you. It can be daunting looking at a screen all day. Matter of fact, just a side note on that real quickly. Studies have shown instructors who use an online textbook and then test, they notice that the students seem to get the information really good when they look right at the middle of the screen. But the material that's on the outside of the screen, say if you have the 4 to 5 inches in the center of the screen, but our eyes tend to look straight ahead in the middle of the screen, not on the peripheral. That's why if you do a resume, it's good to put your key points and comments right smack in the middle of the screen. Don't make the person look at the corner of the screen, believe it or not. That's why resumes, that's a good way to target that if it's an online resume. They've noticed that students tend to miss a lot of the material that's on what's called the peripheral part of the screen, not so much in a textbook format. So that's one of the things they look at. And that's kind of the struggle I have. It's hard for me to read a textbook the traditional way if you're, if it's in English, moving left to right, or if you're in moving right to left in some languages. Either way, I find it easier to read a page from a book but we know that technology wise, they're going to online screens. Now, the personality is a big thing too. I just kind of wanted to touch a little base on the personality portion of it. It's a big item. Your personality plays a big part in your study skills. And we like to do things the comfortable way, right? You like to do things that you're comfortable doing, not the opposing. And I'll show you some examples here. But it's when you have to choose the opposing, how well can you make it? An example for this is I think I asked you how many of you might have to give a speech in a class where you have to stand up either by yourself or in a group. Now, if you're a outgoing, more extroverted type of person, you might look at that going, it's going to be fun. But if you're more of a self-introspective type of person, you like to study alone and you might find the standing up in front of a group to be a little more of a challenge. And so that's where you're put into that, uh, challenges if you have to do it in an opposing way based upon how you feel. And I just put this slide in so you can see some of the challenges. Now, there is not one preference is not better than the other. That's one thing I want to emphasize on that. These are just different styles of how people, how our personalities are. Are you more outgoing or are you more introspective? Do you use your senses more, your 5 senses or senses that you have, or do you think more of an intuitive nature? Same thing with thinking. Are you more of a linear, logical thinker, or do you more feel things on how you do them? And you can see how this plays into studying and even time management, judging, or perceiving. Now, looking at this, which ones of these type of personality preferences would embrace a more rigid time management schedule? Anyone have an idea which ones of these would love to, they write down everything that's coming up in either a book or they put it on their calendar? Yeah, basically those people that are more in tune to using a more disciplined, when I say disciplined time management, they like to write down everything, are going to be the ones on the left. They're going to be the sensing, thinking, they're going to be the people that are more inclined to do that. They're going to be a little more rigidity in their thinking. Now, the people on the right also know that certain assignments come up and there's certain due, but like in the case of intuition, you know that you might have to do an assignment by next Friday, but you kind of work on the assignment and then you handle any problems that come up as they come up. Where a person that is more of a sensing or thinking type person may have it written out. Okay, I need to do this by this time, this by this time. And they even look, okay, what problem could come up? And they actually write it down. For example, if you have to do a research paper and you have to get some professional references or references that are peer reviewed, and you're not sure how to do that, who on campus is going to help you with something like that? who could help you with research on a paper as far as getting information. Thank you. The library. So a person might actually write that down. Oh, I know I'm going to have to write, I'm going to have to visit the library, or I'm going to have to go online and get some assistance. Where an intuitive person may know that, but they may not physically write it down. They may go, well, I'm working on the assignment. Oops, now I've come to a point where I think I'm going to need some help from the library. So that's kind of how you look at it. And again, now this was a little exercise I had. If you want to take a few minutes break, if you don't have to do this. The school, by the way, for those of you, I believe our mascot is an otter. And so this is a pretty basic one. Now, we actually did this exercise. If you have a sheet of paper and a pencil or pen, I'd like you to kind of draw the otter. But if you're right-handed, you need to use your left hand. And if you're left-handed, you need to use your right hand. If you want to take like 3 or 4 minutes or a few minutes and see if you can draw the otter. Now, the actual assignment that I had, but I know that I didn't know if all of you would have a rubber band, is you're supposed to put the pencil, like I'm right-handed, so you put the pencil in your left hand and you tie a rubber band around the first 2 fingers and the pen, and you try to see how well you can draw that. And I'll wait a couple of minutes there. So for those of you, uh, if you want to try that, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. If you need to take a break, go ahead or get something to drink. And you don't have to show it to me, just kind of take a look at it. And then as you're drawing it, and this is a pretty easier drawing than I guess I could have put one up a little more challenging. Let me know how you feel as you're drawing it with your opposing hand. And again, it works better if your pencil is more confined with the rubber band. But I'll give it about 1 more minute and then we'll go with it for there. And again, if you're not drawing it, that's fine too. You can try this, find something like this and try it after the briefing if you want to just try it, and then just kind of say to yourself, or what kinds of motions or challenges are going into your mind. Yeah. The other day I had some people and they say, oh my gosh, I actually drew this better with my opposing hand, which is fine. Now, the idea when we had tutors do this, they did have to put the rubber band because we had rubber bands, and several of the tutors were getting frustrated and tearing up the paper and starting over again. And some of them said, oh my gosh, this doesn't look anything like an otter. Although at that time, I think we had to draw like a crown or something. It was a little more. The idea is, did you encounter any frustration or challenges? And it might be that this is pretty easy. And even if you're drawing with your other hand, if you didn't restrict the pencil, but the idea is to see what it feels like if you're put in an opposing situation. Did you get a little bit of frustration, some anger? Um, yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you for that comment there about being strenuous. Yeah. And so that's an example of how you might be put into it. And it was fun to watch some of the tutors get they were really frustrated and just tore it up and started over again, drawing it. And some said, oh my gosh, this looks, uh, and it's just a fun thing too. Yeah, it definitely does feel awkward. Thank you. Yeah. And so that's how you get into an opposing situation there on that. And so um, the idea is, how do you respond when you're put into that kind of situation? So taking a look at an online class, how many of you felt frustrated reading an online textbook? So what are some things that you could do to maybe make the chat, like make it less frustrating in an online environment, having to read an online a book. To me, it's going to be a challenge no matter what. I just do not like reading large amounts of text online. But
What I've had to do is so I have a philosophy class online
uh-huh.
that's completely online, which I find very, very frustrating because I feel like it's supposed to be more of a discussive type
Yes.
class. And so I actually look up YouTube videos about the subject that we're supposed to be doing.
Okay.
Crash course for learning is like they have some really great philosophy videos.
Great. Oh, that's an excellent idea. Now, this philosophy class, are you taking it online, not synchronous? It's totally online.
It's totally online,
Yeah,
yeah.
oh my gosh, I would really struggle. I took philosophy, and that's to me the only thing that saved me was allowing interaction and discussion by the students.
Yeah, luckily the discussion board for the class, everybody's pretty participant. So, it's a better discussion board than a lot of them that I've had in the past.
Thank you. Good.
But they still don't continue the conversation. They'll make good comments, but they don't want to like continue having a conversation. So,
Yes, yes, and that was one of my workshops I give later in this. Thank you for those comments, by the way. One of the workshops I give later, it's kind of gone out of style, is how to do a successful study group. Now, one of the challenges when I was at BSU, it wasn't so difficult because we were all going on campus, and we could try to make time uh, to do a study group. At this school, unfortunately, we're on like 5 or 6 different campuses, and it's really hard. But one of the I don't want to say a side benefit of the pandemic because this pandemic is absolutely nasty, but one of the challenges that's made it a little easier is students getting more used to online. They can set up study groups. So many of our tutors actually set up online discussion board sessions where just like this, where students like in a philosophy class can get together and talk about it, which is nice, and you don't have to drive to get to it. So
and taking advantage of a lot of classes have embedded tutors,
yes,
and they
exactly.
will have like open hours where you can go in and do tutoring sessions, but a lot of them will also do like group sessions, and those are really great.
They are. I really appreciate that. So again, I don't want to say that's one of a positive of an awful pandemic that we're going through, but it has given students an opportunity to see how online discussions can work. Where if I see, I used to do a lot of study groups for many of these classes like philosophy, sociology, and we would meet, believe it or not, we would meet like on Saturday at the Ada County campus, because those of you that may have taken classes before this started, some of the campuses on Saturday are absolutely totally free. You can just pick a little corner in the tutor lab or in the common area and have a super nice thing. Bring your coffee, your lunch, and everything. And then maybe the following week we'd meet up in Napa to give those students that live in Canyon County a chance to join in. And so these slides here just this give you a kind of idea of what people that are more outgoing and more self reflective like to have. And this is how it can play into your study skills. And you can just kind of scan the differences here. Like I said, I want to emphasize again, one is not better than the other. These are just the kinds of opposing uh, personalities that we have. I like to try to be outgoing, but sometimes I feel like studying by myself. But then other times, like that philosophy class, I absolutely loved a study group. So I learned to use the different personalities. And it's same with sensing and intuitive. And just think here, like intuitive people love to brainstorm, but intuitive people might not be so adapt or want to make a rigid time management schedule. Whereas somebody that's sensing loves a step-by-step instruction. So a sensing person, the first day of class is going to scan the course syllabus with a microscope and the schedule and hope that the professor has got everything lined up really neat and easy to go through. And again, a thinking and feeling person, you can see that right here. And so then this kind of plays out. this kind of plays into it. Now, the other thing that I want to bring up is not only do you have to worry about your teaching style, but who else do you have to worry about? The instructors. Yeah, the instructors. And so um, the instructor's learning style, if they like to talk, like I told you about that course where the professor just walks in, is about as chaotic and boring when he's talking about history in a huge lecture hall. So you really have to hone your note-taking skills, be very creative. Same thing with applied, where you don't have a lot of examples or models in a history class. It's just discussion on events that have occurred in the past, obviously. So you make examples in your notes. I leave little spaces. If you come to my note-taking workshop, we kind of talk about that. If you have a verbal, again, an instructor that's very verbal, you learn to draw diagrams and pictures if you're a more visual person. And again, you see down here a structured class, but maybe I'm more creative. Well, I like to make little doodles in my notes and things like that. So I'm going to create spaces. So this is the added challenge that you have. And of course, in a totally online class, like you mentioned about philosophy, you just have to kind of see how the instructor, obviously you're going to get a lot of reading material, right, and discussions in the discussion board. So that kind of plays into it. Real quickly, just on these slides right here, one of the other things that can affect studying is not only the understanding or the conceptual part, but your mindset, your critical thinking, and your attitudes and belief. And there's many educators, most notably a Dr. Carol Dweck from Stanford, who believes that your mindset, how you think about things, how your discussions within yourself are just as important, if not more, than simply just trying to understand the concepts that can play in. And so that's why I threw some slides in here that talk about your mindset. And I'm not going to have you, excuse me, read all of these per se, except the first one there. If I were to take a glass and pour it halfway with water, how can you describe that to me? The two ways you can describe that glass of water. Half full or half empty. Well, thank you very much. Dr. DeWick's studies, because what she does is she researches mindsets with her graduate students and undergraduate students. She has noticed that when students write down that the glass is half empty, they feel more in a fixed mindset that maybe your intelligence is innate. That's what you're born with. If you struggle with math, you're going to be struggling with math all your life. Whereas those students that tell her the glass is half full tend to more have a positive growth mindset, meaning through positive words, positive reinforcement, and practice, you can motivate yourself to do better. And she spent if you ever have a chance to Google mindsets, it's undoubtedly you'll come up with some of the information and her research on that. And you can see now there is an argument about we all have a growth mindset. We all have a fixed mindset on certain things. But from a standpoint, especially in feedback, I'm at the point where I love every kind of feedback, positive or negative. So I hope when we finish up here, if you want to take the chance to critique the workshop, it's anonymous, to write comments or suggestions. I encourage it. That's how I live by feedback and from my supervisor. I'm not afraid of my supervisor telling me, you might want to do it this way, or you could do this maybe a little better. But that is systematic of the differences between the mindsets. And again, this is where words come in. What do you think the biggest challenge in, we have a student say come into the tutor lab in math and um, what, and they're maybe struggling. What do you think the one statement is they say about math about themselves? Anyone want to type that in? I hate math, or I've always been, I can't do it. Thank you. Or I've never been good at math in my lower grades, why suddenly now should I do good in math? And so that's where the words, the words, and these words are coming from within yourself. Self-defeating prophecies. Very good. Thank you on that. And so that's where a goal or a plan of action, even if you don't write it down as detailed as somebody, other people would, the words themselves, and this is what has saved me as a student, is trying to have a positive. I will give you a quick example. When I was in a class, I used to panic and feel like I was inferior when the professor would start a test and people started, it maybe lasted an hour. And how many of you like to stay through the entire test, even if you get it done, but you feel embarrassed or frustrated because you look up and half the class is gone after 10 minutes? Any of you had that experience? Yes, that was me. I got so freaked out. I had to go see the counselor because it's like I used to just take my time, and my feeling. And the professor said, Scotty, look, if you have 60 minutes to take a test, you use that whole time. You don't have to get up and walk out. Even if the professor's walking back and forth going, oh my gosh, Scotty's the last one in the class, I could be taking a longer lunch right now. Well, I'm sorry, but the counselor said, just think of the teacher as they're paid to sit in there that 60 minutes. And unless they call the test in ahead of time, um, like 5 minutes before, you have a right to sit there. And that's one of the things I do when I take a test. As soon as I'm done with the test, one of the first things that I do is turn it upside down and I do what's called decompression. I close my eyes and just reflect. I don't immediately go back and look at the test. I just relax for a couple of minutes. And then I flip the test up. If I feel like I'd like to go through it again, I don't necessarily feel I have to do that. But if that takes the whole time in the class, I don't care if the professor. So I used to tune the professors out. I had one that used to stare at me because there was always one or two of us, and I was one of those two students that would sit in the class. Definitely. Thank you for that comment there. Yeah, take a moment to snap out. Very good. Yes. And so that's one of the things that I kind of learned. And so these little slides here are nice to look at as a reflection on your self-efficiency. And these are some examples of I lack of comments you might make. I lack the skills. I can't do it because I don't understand it. I'm embarrassed. I'm not as smart. And so um, these are some of the positives. So this is what Carol Dweck does, and a lot of researchers do. They feel that it's within yourself to try to talk, and it's not easy, because if you are struggling in a class, even some students say, "Well, I try to be positive, Scotty, but it's not helping any. What can I do to improve?" And so that's where, seeking out a tutor, or talking to the instructor might be a good idea for that. And again, I'll just let you look at these slides. I'll make the handouts because I know I have about 5 minutes here, and I wanted to cover a little bit of time management strategies. Um, these are just some sections for motivation and things like that. Have any of you seen Bloom's taxonomy about critical thinking? And so looking at a question, remember I told you I got a D- on a philosophy test because the professor said compare and contrast the ideologies and the traits in communism with socialism. And he gave me a D-, and I freaked out. And I asked the professor, why'd you give me a D on the paper? And he said, Mr. Barron, would you please read the question? I had to read it out in class because he put me on the spot, because he wouldn't see me in the office, because that's how he taught the class. And so I said, compare and contrast the ideologies between communism and socialism. Pick two or three of them. Well, what I did is I described communism and socialism. And he said, the only reason, Mr. Barron, I gave you a D- is you did a good job of explaining it, but that's not what I asked in the question, is it? So the next time when I say compare and contrast, which if you look on this is a level 4 analyzing question, you're going to do that, right? So I took that class 21 years ago, and I remember that specifically about blooms right there. So let me go to the time management. So that's kind of a big thing. And when you look at procrastination, kind of look at procrastination this way. It's easy to procrastination is not it's the nice thing about procrastination is you can overcome it. You're not born with it. It's just something that we develop, so you can kind of work on it. You can see right there, what should you be doing, things that I would like to do, but then things I do when I'm procrastinating. This is a big one with social media. So I see students studying in the class, and the next thing you know, they are looking at their phone or their social media accounts. And believe it or not, if you do, and those of you have mentioned to me that you can't even study at home when you get interrupted. If you're in deep thought and you get interrupted, it can take a while for you to get back into thought again, doesn't it? It can take you 15, 20, maybe even 30 minutes just to refocus. And this slide just gives you an overview of the different things that occur with procrastination. You lack the skills, the motivation. You may take a class that you don't particularly want, that you like to take, but you have to take it for your degree. The complexity of the assignment. So there's a lot of reasons for procrastination here. You just get confused by it. Your time management skills might be weak, or your judgment skills. Fear of failure, obviously, but fear of success. You might get an absolutely super score on your first test, but the next thing you know, how am I going to maintain that? I still have a 13 weeks left in the semester. So that's what fear of success is. You score something really good, and then you have this anxiety. How am I going to maintain this? Oh my gosh, I got a C on the second test after I got an A on the first test. And those are some challenges with procrastination. With time management, I wanted to jump to time management here and how many of you use some form of time management strategies? In other words, writing down your assignments, either by calendar or on paper. Do you find it helpful? Sometimes, yeah. Real quickly here, just so you see, this is something in addition to the Vark, is what kind of personality. Those of you that are box type personalities are tend to be organized. So you might embrace a time management strategy. Triangles are more of a leader type. They'll be very organized. Circles are more empathetic. Uh, Counselors on campus. Now, that's not to say that you're not organized, but the two on the right, the squiggle is a brainstorming kind of person. The kind of personality you are might affect how you do time management strategies. The rectangle is an interesting one. The rectangle is somebody who says, why am I doing this? Why are we doing that? It's a state of transition, like if you're coming back to school to get another degree. But the reason I bring these shapes up is, and you can actually Google these and study them, what kind of shape you are can affect your time management. You can see, though, that developing some form of time management strategies does give you, it can help you with your assignments, meeting your obligations, organizing your priorities. And one of the big things, this is one of the big things, having strong time management skills is an excellent soft skill in the job market. And this is something that a lot of employers in town, when we get people out to work in the diesel program, the welding program, our employers come back and say, oh, CWI, you're doing a great job helping them understand the concepts. Can you do a little bit more for the time management strategies, the soft skills, as they call it? And so I wanted to show you here, this again repeats it. Any of you that have an equal pie, I really give you, I bow to you for that, because I know that most of us don't have an equal pie of what you're doing in school, work, and leisure. So you have to obviously adjust your pie accordingly when you do this. Now, with time management, does anybody know how many hours a week we have? Yeah, yours is totally, yeah, a lot of us are not equal. We have 168 hours a week in time management strategies, 7 days, 24 times 7. This is an example of somebody that I worked with who absolutely just didn't know where their time was between their job, going to the gym, eating, sleeping. And so this is something that you can do. I'm going to put a link up here very shortly. I have to bring this in so I can pull up some items for you in the chat. Um, this is something you might want to do if you just kind of see where your life is. Now, this is not fixed, obviously, but this can give an idea to somebody where you are during the week as far as what you do, your time management strategies. This is another sheet, and I'm going to give you this presentation so you have these and a website that you can download free. You can obviously buy these at the store like Walmart, but I also have a website called Calendarpedia that you can download these things with. This is a good example of a sheet that allows you to map out each of your courses. It doesn't establish the time, but it lets you know what the different policies are for your assignments. This one here is a daily sheet. So you can map out things that you do daily. When are things due? This one here is one that you can write down everything like what kind of note taking do you have to do? What kind of study plans do you have to do? What kind of reading assignments do you have to do? And I have an example. I'm going to download this for you. And if I miss anything, you can email me at tutoring. It'll be on this PowerPoint, and I'll be happy to send these to you. But here's an example, and then here's a blank sheet right here of what you can do. This is one for those people that aren't necessarily looking at time management, everything that they do in the future. This is more on a daily basis. I use this all the time. Like I'll wake up in the morning or even the night before going, I know this is what I have to do today. So I make a little schedule of what I have to do each day for that. And so this is an example, and I set a priority. A, things are things I need to do. B are the next things I have to do. And C finally are the less important. And so this is something that you can do on a daily basis, and I'll do that. So what I'd like to do, since we're coming up to the end here, does anyone have any questions? Do any of you do anything that helps you with time management strategies? And you can talk if you want or put it into the chat there. Anything, anybody have anything? Here are some handouts that I'm going to download. The first thing I'd like to share with you is a little form, especially if you're getting additional credit for the workshop. I'll share this real quickly here with you. This is a little critique, and I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes so you can pull it up. This is a little thing here. It's if you are getting extra credit, you can fill this out. And if you answer that you're getting extra credit for a class, you can list, it'll open up some extra boxes and you can ask it'll give you, put down the name of the instructor, and I'll help notify the instructor that you received credit. At the bottom, there is a link. If you open this link, you're more than welcome to do an evaluation of the workshop. If you do open up the link, it'll open up a second window. So in order to complete the first survey, what it does is it'll open up a separate link here. So then on the top, you have to come up and still go back to this form to submit it. But you can do it. Now, you don't have to do the workshop survey. That's strictly optional if you want to do that on there. So I will go ahead and send you the link to the form. And again, if you have to, if you're not able to get to the form, I can send it to you separately, but I'm going to go ahead and share the form right now for you. That's a link to the form. And again, if you fill it out and you answer the question that you are getting additional credit, it'll open up an additional box. The second thing that I will send to you is the actual presentation, so you have a copy of it and you can review it and go over it. And if you have any questions, again, it'll have the address for tutoring on there, and you're more than welcome to uh, to ask me questions about it or provide additional information or anything that you would like to follow up with on. Okay, this second link I put out here is the actual presentation, and take a few minutes if you can and just kind of go through the slides. And if we covered most of them, and I apologize for not getting through all of them. I tried to gauge this based on the discussion, and I may have put a couple too many slides on there, but feel free to go through and look at the slides if you want on there. I'm going to send you a link here to a free download where you can copy those extra calendars. You can actually print these off. Those of you that want to do you can print out little sheets to do your time management on if you want to do that. Right at the very bottom there, it's HTTPS Calendarpedia. If you open that, and you can bookmark it if you want. This is a free website that you can download different kinds of sheets to be able to do time management strategies. If you want to do a weekly sheet, that one worksheet that I told you about that you can use to kind of map out, like, what do I have to take notes with? What do I have to study for tests and those kind of things? That's called the Learning Plan Workshop, Learning Plan Worksheet, and I will provide the link for you on that one. And I'll leave this up for a few minutes. If you need to take off, thank you. Just make sure you fill out the one form if you need to list your instructors of any that you get credit. If for some reason you have a problem with the form, you can email me. On the top of that PowerPoint is it's tutoring@cwidaho.edu. And if for some reason you have a problem with the form, you can email me and let me know that you attended the workshop, and I will make sure, and I can check your schedule. And if there's any instructors you've listed as getting extra credit, I'll make sure that they get notified that you attended. Thank you. And again, I kind of apologize. I probably put a little more information on there. I tried to get as much as I could in 90 minutes. And I might go back and just do the study skills and time management as 2 individual workshops. So it kind of spreads the information out there. And so I really do appreciate your input. Feel free to fill out the survey if you want, or you can even contact me, and I'd be happy to talk to you if you want to give me some suggestions on the workshop. I do appreciate all of your input. It was great input. You were, as a group, very collaborative, and I appreciate that. So thanks again for attending. I think next week I'm doing it on listening and note taking. And by the way, real quickly, just so you know, I am recording the workshop. So if for some reason you can't make one in person, we're going to be posting these on our YouTube channel, and we'll let you know if we do that. So you can have an opportunity to listen. But join me for one of the listening and note taking workshops. Those are usually very spirited, with comments from many of you on strategies that you do good for note taking. So thanks again for attending. If you still have a question, ask me in the chat. I'll stay online. And those links you're more than welcome to download. And have a nice long extended weekend, and be careful if you're driving on the roads. So thank you again for attending, and best success with your courses.
I do have one question.
Sure, go ahead.
I was looking at the schedule for the workshops, and I noticed in March that you're only doing them on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Is that going to be set in stone?
Do you like the workshops on Friday?
Well, the ones on Wednesday and Thursday are during my class times.
Oh,
So,
well, you know what I might just do? I might just extend them to Friday the same too. I can do that.
oh, okay.
I'll do that.
That'd be awesome for me.
Yeah.
I would greatly appreciate it, because then
Yeah.
I can not have to skip class to come watch them.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'll do that. When I did these workshops in person, I used to do them on Fridays and Saturdays because that was the easiest time to get a room.
Yeah.
And some students say, well, Friday's kind of like I'm at the end of the week. I'd like my Fridays to relax. And so I say, well, can you come in Saturday? And some students say, oh, I work on Saturday, but I can come on Friday.
Yeah.
You know what? I think so. I think my memory workshop and my study group workshop were only, they were only Wednesday and Thursday, so I can add a Friday. And I do believe I have a workshop on testing, and due to a conflict, those workshops will meet Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. There is one session that's on Saturday. I couldn't do it on a Friday because I have a conflict that day.
I highlighted the Saturday one so I could come to it. So
Excellent. Excellent. Good. Yes, I'll make a note of that, and I can add that easily. And then I'll just put an announcement out for the instructors to say that we've added the memory workshop to a Friday too. I can easily do that.
wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
today.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Scott,
Yes.
I actually, first of all, thank you for the workshops. It was really helpful for me. And I just wanted to talk about my schedule, my study schedule, and my current study, because it's my first semester at UWI, and I'm taking 5 class, 4 credit class, and then only one, the English bridge. And I made a plan for study. Like, for example, I have from Monday to Saturday, I have to study one course per day.
Uh-huh.
But it happens sometimes I mix everything, and then sometimes I don't. I feel overwhelmed about my own plan because it doesn't really help for me, and it's kind of trouble. And sometimes I'm in trouble, and I have to do something, my homework or assignment on time because I don't want to be late. And
Yes.
it's really stressful because sometimes I have to come after work at 11 to finish my homework before the deadline, before the deadline was.
Yeah.
It's really,
Do you kind of
really,
struggle with that a little bit, getting your homework done on time?
yeah.
Yeah. And which program are you in?
Business. I'm taking business.
Oh, in business?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like what we might want to do is kind of set up, and I can, what are some of the classes that you're taking again?
I have business, introduction of business, communication 101, English 101, CW 101, and then a non-credit class, bridge English.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like what we might want to do is to set up another appointment to where we can kind of go in, and you can kind of let me know in a little more detail. I might bring a couple of other tutors in that are some business tutors to kind of give us some ideas on how that can help you with your assignments.
Yeah.
Would you be able to send me an email, and give me some times when you would be available to maybe connect on a separate Zoom session and go through that?
Actually, I'm only available on Friday because I have to study on Friday. I don't have class, but I go to school to study, just to do my homework and study. So I'm available on Friday.
So on Fridays?
Yeah,
Is that,
before noon, before 12 a.m.
oh, before 12 a.m.?
12 p.m. Sorry.
Okay. So Fridays is the best day for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you know what I think I'll have you do? Would you have some time next Friday then to go through that? That would give me some time to get with some tutors, and you can you can send me an email of your, schedule, and you can kind of write down some of the things that you'd like to focus on. Can you see the chat box?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to send you my email and ask you to send me an email directly. And then what I'll have you do is write down some of the things that you just told me. The speaker's working a little bit. It's a little bit hard right here on this particular link.
Okay.
And then what I'd like to do is talk to some of the tutors, if you can kind of let me know the classes you're taking.
Okay.
So let me give you my email address. I just sent it out.
I see it.
And send me an email again of all of those things that you said you were, you kind of would help with. And let me see what your classes are to see if I can get some additional tutors in that we can sit down and kind of go through some of those things that you brought up.
Okay. That would be really helpful because since I started the classes, I haven't put my computer away or my books or my my notebook, because every day, every time I have to check, and I don't have any planned study. I would have to have one because it will be helpful.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, trying to put that down in the email and send that to me so I can follow up with you.
Okay, I will.
Okay, good. And I'll send you a response back as soon as I've had a chance to read that. And I'd like to set up a separate Zoom meeting with you, if that's okay. Is that?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And look over some of the stuff I gave you. I hope you did find some of the stuff kind of informative today.
That was really helpful, and I will do my best to put on practice. That would be so good.
Okay, good. And I'll
Thank you.
follow up with you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
And
And
good
then just
day.
send me that email when you can.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.